Hi, my name is Joel Hansen. I'm the Officiating Development Manager at the IHF. Welcome to this recording and introduction of the new OPM for official system. This is an introduction to the updated document to tell you as a referee or as a lines person how to operate in the IHF for official system. We will, throughout the presentation, meet a few IHF officials that will share their experience about this new way of working and updated parts for you as a referee or a lines person. For the season 2022-2023, the IHF introduced an updated version of the 3 official system and the 4 official system. This is all gathered in the document we call for the OPM, the Officiating Procedure Manual. In this presentation, we will give you an introduction to enable you to utilize the theoretical material and the video material that is connected to this to learn you how to implement this on the ice in the best possible way. In this introduction video, we will give you a little bit of a background on the work behind the development of this manual and the document. We will go over in detail important changes and updates that is made in this document. We will also go over in detail focus areas and some instructional videos that could help you in the implementation of this new document. We also have the opportunity to meet some of the IHF game officials that will share with us their lessons and what they have learned implementing this new officiating procedure manual. But let's start first with our development process. Ice hockey is a changing and evolutional sport. Our sport grows and gets better and better for every year. This means that we also need to update the way we work as game officials and improve our way of working to be up in level with the game. This also comes in hand when we talk about the official documents we are utilizing to instruct and teach game officials what to do and where to stand. For us at the IHF, this means that we have worked with our procedure manuals, that is the instructions and the work on which we gather all game officials that will work in our IHF tournaments or in national tournaments back home. The development process had the goal that we wanted to bring everyone to the same page, that we wanted to have, just like the unified rulebook, a common document that tells all the game officials how they are supposed to work when they come to our IHF events, and hopefully also work exactly in the same way in their domestic leagues preparing up for the IHF events. We also had an opportunity to see what do we need to improve. We had a document that has been alive in many years and that hasn't been updated really since 2009. Since 2009, a lot of things happen in hockey and a lot of things happen within officiating. We want to have a chance to really take out the best from that and improve our game and the way of working for you as a referee or a lines person. But we're not only there to change. We also want to enforce and continue with the things that we have been doing well. Could we be better to emphasize this? Could we be better to explain the things that we have been doing well so that we are continuing to doing that as well, at the same time as we're adding on things that we could change and do better for the future? Watching this video, I bet you are curious about what is new and what are the updates around the 4 officials manual. Well, first of all, the thing you will see is that we have a completely new layout and overview of our document. The document is consisting of 5 major chapters. These chapters is there to be helping you in a constructive way, take in information and be able to implement the information out on the ice. The 5 chapters is first a brief introduction about the terms and the terminology that is used in the document and that is important to understand certain aspects of the 4 official system. We start then off with different aspects on the cooperation and work around face-offs. The 3rd chapter is about the procedures and areas of responsibility for referees and lines person. This is then broken down to procedures during stoppage of play when play is not going on. And the last chapter is really to explain what do we do if we have a referee or a lines person that is injured. We will try to cover the important changes and updates in these 5 chapters in this presentation. But what is the general updates around this document? Well, what we hope that you will see is that we have actually cleaned up this. This document is a lot more clearer in the way of working and how to go from theoretical knowledge to practical implementation. This document was also previously in our OPM, that was a combined document over 300 pages that was combining all sort of vital information for a game official or an M&A. What we did now was that we broke this out and we really focused on the way of working so that you can have one document where you only find the most important aspects around the procedures that you need to know in the for official system. We also involve our game officials. We are very thankful for the great support and help from various M&As and leagues, and especially their on-ice officials. This is a developed document for on-ice officials by on-ice game officials. This is so important that we have the involvement of our professional and top game officials on how we work the best on the ice in the for official system, because it's nothing if we cannot take our theory and actually work with it in practical implementation. This is why you will see that practical implementation is one of the key aspects when it comes to how to take in this manual. The second part is that we also have a little bit of a more in-depth and clarification about why and how. In our previous OPM, we talked a lot about where to stand and what to do, but not really why and how we work as a team out on the ice. We hope that the new updated OPM can give you an in-depth clarification about this why and how, so that we work with a purpose as a team. This is something also our professional referees will share a little bit more in-depth knowledge about, and how they took this from theory to implementation and how they were able to perfect their game out there. What is also important, and what is not really maybe mentioned that highly in the document, but it's a bigger change when it comes to the implementation, is the updated linesperson procedures. You have probably, if you read the document, come across words like designated blue line and designated face-off spot. We will go through here in this video a little bit more about the practical implementation of these two new wordings, because that's really one of the key things that we have. It's updates around wording and terms. We try to harmonize a lot more the different words in both the theoretical part, but also in the videos and information material that we send out. You will come across in this video and in the document that we talk about referees and linesperson being disconnected. We will talk about finding the best sight lines to make the right decisions. We will talk a lot about the areas of responsibility, not only in between referee and referee, linesperson and linesperson, but also areas of responsibility as a team. We will come across the wordings around areas of risk of things that can happen around our game as the game is being played or in stoppages of play. As I mentioned earlier, designated blue line and designated face-off spot will also be critical wordings that is important to understand to be able to implement this in a theoretical way to a practical way. If you have read the rulebook very thoroughly, you would also see that we have changed name on our video goal judge. The VGJ is now the VRC. The VRC is the video review consultant. The video review consultant is the person that is in charge to help the game officials to make the right on-ice call through video review. We will break down this presentation in two parts, where we first talk about the referee procedures, that we get help from some of the best referees in the world to be more in-depth about the implementation. We will then move over to the linesperson side, talk about the major changes there, before we meet one of our top linespersons in the world, going a little bit more in depth about those procedures. So let's start with the referee procedures. What we would like to say is that there's really not many major changes that are made. Minor adjustments is made and it's mainly in connection to create the best sightlines. You will see in the document, maybe we have moved a little bit in these instructions that the referees take slightly a higher position in connection to end zone positions, that the referees could be a little bit more freely on changing the ends if the play is getting stalled on the opposite side. This is mainly that we have the goal that the referees should have the best sightlines to make the best decisions, regardless of what's happening on the ice. And the major changes is mainly around clarifications and definitions in the cooperation between the referees. And that's why we are dividing end zones and neutral zones in what we call areas of responsibility and areas of risk. This is not as a rule book where it's more black and white, but this is a fundamental start where referees and linesperson, and in this case, referees, can have a more common ground to start on and have discussions about how they perfect the game and the cooperation out on the ice to make the right calls. We will start to dig in a little bit about the referee and the work around the end zone. So what we said here in the previous slide is that we didn't really change that much when it comes to where the referee stands, where the referee starts, etc. The major change in the OPM for the 4 official system has been that we have divided the end zone, for example, into different areas of responsibility. To be able to do this, even if we talk about the flexible cooperation, we need to do a strict alignment where we divide the zones. To be able to do that, we created 4 zones, 4 major zones that we will discuss more about who is mainly responsible for making the judgment calls in that zone. You will see here in the presentation that these zones are not black and white. This is just to have a basic understanding if I'm R1 or R2, where is my main area of responsibility when play is going on. If we do not divide this, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of discussion between game officials to really have an understanding on where is my partner looking at a given moment. So what we did with these 4 zones in the end zone was really to define in a clearer way where is R1's main responsibility, R1 low in the end zone where play is currently being played, and R2 in neutral zone, where will he or she have their main focus in the same way that they know then when R1 have their focus. But as I said, there will also be areas where we have a shared responsibility. And to have a shared responsibility, we have to give one referee a little bit more responsibility in that area. It doesn't mean in any of these responsibilities that the R1 or R2 can never make a call, can never take a decision in a designated area just because we say that zone 4 is mainly R2's responsible. What we say is that from our experience and the way the professional referees have worked with this throughout the last years, they have realized that the best angles and the best sightlines in this specific zone is coming from the R1 or R2. So when we talk about making decisions in the area of R1 down in the corner, we mainly made this because we know that if the referee is in a good position, R1 is most likely the one having the best angles and the best sightlines to make the best decision. This doesn't mean that if R1 is missing a situation where R2 has a clear view that this is a missed call by R1, that R2 cannot assist. But this should not be something that happens all the time and that both referees always has the same penalty. That can happen and it's good when it happens. But it's important that the reason why we divide this is that we can cover all of the ice and as much ice as possible. If that comes that both referees has the same situation, it means that maybe it could be like that one referee is not taking responsibility of that area of responsibility that he or she has. When we talk about the areas where we are sharing, it is important to know that there is no prestige. There is never any prestige in the cooperation between the referees and the linesperson and the referees and referees. Our aim is that we cover the ice with the best sightlines so that we make the best possible calls. If play is transitioning from one zone to another, it is a shared responsibility that we are not letting play go too early or too late. This is something that comes with experience and feel for the game. Game officials need to communicate prior to the game, during the game, and after the game to perfect this kind of zone system in their corporation. We will come into a little bit of the lines person's work as well, but I would like to take the opportunity to really express that also here, it is not only the two referees making the call and finding the best sightlines. It also comes back to that the lines persons work actively in the leadership and in the control of the game, which means that they are also in charge of finding areas of responsibility where they can cover up where the referees are not watching. When we break down these areas of responsibility, we talk about areas of risk. Risk is really where we can identify that things are happening on the ice and where we might have to share a little bit of the attention out on the ice. When we talk about areas of risk, we divide them within the zones. We talk about zone number 1 in front of the net. That is one of the most important areas out on the ice. This is where we most likely have the majority of attention around a goal opportunity or a scoring chance. This is where it's easy that we as R1 or R2 get a little bit of a tunnel vision, that we might be a little bit puck caught. So what we need to do is to divide this into different areas of responsibility, since this is a shared area. So in this case, if we have a puck that is on the same side as R1, R1 should really have the main responsibility in risk area 2. This is where R1 has the best sightlines. If then R2 knows that the puck is around there, this is where R1 has their attention, then R2 takes over for the other risk areas. This is where R2 can really take part of risk area 1 and risk area 3 to really make sure that we cover any secondary attacks on the goalkeeper that comes after a shot on a rebounds, where R1 has really been making an effort to have a focus on if the puck crossed the goal line or not. This means that we need to have that cooperation. We need to rely on our partner, that we really share this responsibility and that we cover the areas of risk. If the puck is on the other side, if the puck is on risk 1 area, R1 has to think about, where is my best sightline? Maybe my sightline is better in risk area 2 and risk area 3. So while I'm covering the goal line to make sure that I cover if the puck crosses the line or not, maybe my main responsibility is to catch situation that happens in risk area 2, where R2 could have the best angle in on plays happening in risk area 1. Again, this is not a black and white situation. This comes with a flow, and that we have to be flexible and read the game. But we need to be able to talk within the team and together with our officiating coach about the areas of risk and where we share different sort of responsibilities in covering situations. If we did not have these to talk about, it would be very hard to have a constructive dialogue or conversation with our partner, where they were watching and what they were seeing. We also identified 2 other areas of risk. We call that risk 4 and risk 5. In the end zone, this is the areas really where we break in to the net, where the players are really taking position, battling for ice, battling for puck. This is also where we need to share the responsibility and work together in the best possible way to cover as many situations as possible and try to avoid not watching the same situations so that we cover as much ice as possible. If we move over to the neutral zone, we had a very long discussions with the referees about how do we then divide the neutral zone. Well, the neutral zone is a tricky part because we have constantly a game flow. With a change of the ice surface where we have a smaller neutral zone, the play is not as stalled there. The neutral zone is mainly a transport stretch to get into the attacking zone. So what the working group decided then was that when we talk about areas of responsibility, we mainly have only one zone. In this part, we only work with one zone where the game officials will share the responsibility. So that's why you will see that play will transition from end zone, zone 4, to zone 1. Zone 1 is the neutral zone. And why is this the reason? Well, it is a very sensitive part of the game where we can have stretch passes, quick changes, a lot of things are happening. So this is a shared area where R1 and R2 has to be able to identify the different areas of risk and share the responsibility in zone 1. Also, talking about sightlines, this is where the L1 and L2, the lines person, has a huge responsibility in making sure that they also have the best sightlines, not only to cover the offside and the icing, but also enable a good cooperation with the referees to cover as much possible play in zone 1. So how do we divide zone 1 then? Because everyone watching at everything in this zone 1 is not really constructive. That's why we broke down zone 1 in 3 different risk areas, where in a transitional play, we would always have R1 as the major person working to have a control around the puck area and the puck entering the attacking zone. R2 has to clear out play, making sure that there's no players left behind, that there's no follow through in the checks, before R2 takes up the coverage in any of the risk areas. In that transition, when R2 is covering the players behind the play, it's really a huge responsibility from L1 and L2 to make sure that they support R1 in coverage of the neutral zone and the situations happening there. When R2 has been able to transfer the play and really let the players go, then R2 has to make sure that he or she covers any of the risk areas where the play is not currently located. This will also be a nice transition into the play of the end zone, where you will see in the attacking zone that the R2 will take the main responsibility of the players that will come into the zone in either zone 4 or in the zone 1, where we have a shared responsibility in front of the net. It is so important there that R2 really makes sure that he or she work actively and rapid up the ice to make sure that they find the best sightlines to support R1 in the attacking zone. This doesn't mean that R2 needs to hustle and go past players and lose the coverage in the neutral zone, but R2 cannot stall around and lay back and wait in the other attacking zone. There has to be a constant connection between R1 and R2, where R2 can really adjust speed and angles to create good sightlines to support R1 in the attacking zone. We're now going to watch a few examples from games from the World Championship where we really worked with this implementation in the attacking zone and the neutral zone. In this video, will you have a chance to see a little bit more in depth what it means when we talk about the referee's various areas of responsibility on the ice. As you see, when we have play in the end zone, there could be a lot of things happening around the ice on various different locations. This means that you as the referee will have to know where your main area of responsibility is at any given point. This is to make sure that the referees is not becoming puck watchers and watching the same situations and risking to miss situations happening around the ice. As presented in the movie about areas of risk, we know that things happening around the net is crucial for the game. Here we have to have a clear understanding of the various areas of responsibilities and how we as a team work together to cover as much of the ice surface as possible. In this situation, R1 gets pushed and ends up in a bad positioning, loosening his main area of responsibility in the end zone. In this situation, even though we have a given manual talking about who's responsible for what area throughout the game, R2 has to step in and find the right sightlines and support R1 in the area of responsibility where he is not capable of covering on the ice. The ultimate goal is that the referee covers as much as possible on the ice and preferably that they share this responsibility. But when a referee get disconnected, it is important that the other referee is not led by prestige, rather having teamwork and support being the main factor to cover situations where R1 or R2 might be disconnected from their main area of responsibility. When we have the main areas of responsibility, we talk about entrance into the zone, play being maintained in the end zone, but also when play is leaving the end zone. In this example, you can see the importance of having a broad coverage of the ice. We have players down in the corner following through the situations, creating an area of risk where something could happen after that the player has played out the puck in the neutral zone. We also see the importance of the game officials to cover also when the exit from the end zone to the neutral zone happens, where we could have an area of risk where collisions or checks could be delivered with a high force and with players not being aware of incoming players. Areas of responsibility is something that is not written in stone. It's a basic guideline and starting point where every referee and game official crew should have their starting basic points in every game preparation and also basic procedures out on the ice. Let's get down to ice level and let's start with putting ourselves in the referee one's perspective. As we can see in this situation, R1 has the main responsibility at area 1 in front of the net, but also to be able to have a broad perspective, seeing other players outside the puck area coming in towards the area of responsibility. In this situation, R1 has the main responsibility to watch the players on the left side of the screen in front of the net, but also be able to catch players coming in towards that area of responsibility from the side. Here it's important that R1 does not get too puck focused and scared of missing out anything happening around the puck. Also, when play is transferring, moving around in the end zone, it is important that R1 reads play and act rather than react. In this situation, R1 ends up in a bad position and reacts rather than act prior to the puck coming towards him. When that happens, we can see that R1 get pushed and what we call disconnected. R1 get completely disconnected from his areas of responsibility and also on the players and the play happening in and around the net. This is of course a position where R1 or any referee would not like to end up in, but we know that referees will and can be disconnected several times throughout the game. The important part is to minimize those situations. In this case, R1 does the only thing that he can do is really to hustle to a new position to be able to take control again of the areas of responsibility that he has in this position. As play move out, you can see that white player chips out the puck, but where red player is delivering a check or is about to deliver a check. If R1 get too puck focused to see where play is transferring, it is easy that R1 is missing out on important situations that will happen when a player plays the puck and it ends up to another player. This is why we have two referees on the ice, where R1 that will become R2 can cover the entire ice behind the play as R2 that becomes R1 takes the responsibility up in neutral zone. R1 in this case has to have cool and make sure that he or she maintains the overview of all the players before moving up towards the ice. Let's see the same situation, but now from R2's perspective. As you will note from the first clip to this clip, R2 has different angles into the play. This is the same play from a different angle and different sightlines. As you see in this clip, R2 has the main responsibility around the closest puck area. When you watch in towards the net, there are several players in between, and the sightlines for R2 to make a proper call in this situation in front of the net is very restricted. In this case, it is important that R2 have the main focus around the puck
and leaves the remainder of the ice to R1 and the linespersons to cover. As play is transitioning into the ice after the shot, also the areas of responsibility is shifting. As we said earlier, from the R1 perspective, in this situation, R1 gets pushed and gets disconnected from the area of play. This means that R1 is losing his area of responsibility and is not able to cover the ice where he is expected. This is where R2 have to step in and make sure that he takes part and takes over the areas of responsibility until R1 is no longer disconnected. When play is transitioning from end zone to neutral zone to the other end zone, it is really the key that R2, that becomes R1, use the feel for the game to find the proper position, to first see the delivery of the puck, but then also to catch other players that is moving up towards the ice and will become the players receiving the puck and initiating battle in the neutral zone or in the upcoming attacking zone. In this situation, it is important that R2 covers the ice where the players that will be initiated in the puck battle, rather than watching the players leaving the puck and delivering the puck up the ice. This is to be able to see the entire situation if there's any dirty plays or any checks up the ice. This is a great example where we can see how sharing the ice and sharing the perspective gives the game officials the best view on the situation where things can happen. Working as a referee in the four official system is a continuous dance together with your partner to always find the best possible sightlines. This is created by continuously working in a diagonal position and always try to identify the areas of responsibility and areas of risk where you as an individual has a responsibility to watch. Let's start looking into the areas of risk when it comes to the end zone. In the end zone, one of the most natural positions to watch for is when play is in and around the net. This is where we can see that most of the play and the attention will be throughout the play in the end zone. When we divide the area of risk in front of the net, we take it up in 3 parts. This is where you have to make sure that you and your colleague has a good communication prior to the game to assure that you know in which area you are watching, depending on where the play is positioned and where you will get the best sightline. Naturally, when the play is on the same side as the referee, that the referee R1 has the major focus in that area of risk in front of the net, and that R2 covers up the remaining parts of that risk area. These risk areas are divided into 3 various parts, but we also have risk area 4 and 5 that is around the net, and where we often have play coming in towards risk area 1, 2, and 3. Here it's also important that the game officials and the referees find the best angles to make a right call on the ice. This is where R1 must work up and down towards the boards and above the icing line to be able to make a proper decision in that risk area, depending on where the play is positioned. Also, R2 has to find the right angles to identify where in the risk area he or she is currently watching. It is important to note that ice hockey is a fast-paced sport and where we are never standing still. We are in continuous movement to find the best sightlines and the best angles to make the right decision. The work to find this in the risk areas in front of the net starts already when the play is transitioning from one end zone to another through the neutral zone. Let's take position of the R1 following play into the end zone. Here it's very important that R1 has the major focus on the play closest to the puck. R1 should not pay attention too much outside this area, and when that area creeps up to where we have a shared responsibility, It's important that the R1 works to get the best sightlines towards the situation, and that R2 follows up and covers the remaining areas of the ice, but also has an angle to be able to support R1 in those decisions. The higher up the puck comes, the bigger responsibility will be on R2 compared to R1. It is important that both referees continuously work with active skating to find the best angles and the sightlines to the situations to make the right call. When there is a battle up the ice and goes towards the boards, as in this situation, R1 has the main focus in this area of risk and responsibility. It is important that R2 is not also watching the same situation and the puck, rather covering up the other areas of risk and making sure that he or she covers the remainder of the ice surface. This is to cover any secondary infractions that might come up, or if we have infractions happening outside the main area of play. In this sequence, we have a good example where R1 and R2 is sharing the responsibility from the play moving up towards the ice. R2 that now becomes R1 up in the left corner. You can see how he has the main responsibility on the puck and the players around the puck. R1 that becomes R2 has a great opportunity to cover up the remainder of the ice and the remainder of the two areas of risk where R1 is not watching in this situation. This means that R1 has a great opportunity to find infractions happening around the area of play, and where R2 has the possibility to really make sure that he makes a good decision on any secondary infractions, or where we could have different situations happening connected to, for example, interference situations breaking in towards the net. This is not that R1 and R2 always have to watch and make sure that they take, for example, the same penalties. That is not the ultimate goal of making the decisions on the ice. The ultimate goal is that the game officials and the referee shares the ice and divides the responsibility so that we cover as many situations as good as possible.
We hope that the examples you just saw gave a little bit more clarity about the theoretical part that we just talked about. To be able to give a little bit of an insight and to give you a bit more hands-on idea how we move from theory to practical, we have the huge pleasure to invite our IHF referee, Linus Öhlund, to this session to talk a little bit more about his experience implementing this new way of working in the four officials OPM. Linus is truly one of our most experienced IHF referees that we had in this past season. Linus is currently a professional referee since many years with the Swedish Hockey League. He is also a very experienced IHF game officials with several World Championship under 20s, under 18s, and Olympic Winter Games under his belt. And we are really excited to hear more about Linus' experience on implementing this new four official system. Linus, we just watched here the updates about the four officials manual and the areas of responsibility. You have been one of the referees working with developing this and updating the documents. What was important for you in this work as a referee in the four official system?
Based on the experience, me and Toby, who's also worked with this manual, saw that we had a lot of problems going to international tournaments, working together with colleagues, referees from other leagues, and we have every league had their own system. So that was a real challenge going to a tournament, come together as a group and do as efficient work as possible. So we started to figure out the areas of responsibility to clarify for everybody who's going to a tournament so that everybody is on the same page.
So, you know, we have a lot of documents that we work with. We have the rule book, situation handbook, and also now the OPM, or we had the OPM before. You know, we talk a lot about the same things, you know, positioning wise and call it black and white, where you should stand and the different positions didn't change that much. So it's really the areas of responsibility that is the biggest update. Do you see this as kind of a black and white rule book with the areas of responsibility, or how should a reader view this when they read the updated document?
You know, the game of hockey is so complex, so it's impossible to write down every situation that can happen. So for us, we created this form and procedure manual, more of a toolbox to have some sort of guidelines to help the referees. So it's not a black and white book that you always have to look at that specific area. It's more of a, as you said, a toolbox to create some guidelines to help the referee.
And now, you know, the people that watch this this video, but also read the document, and it's going to go from taking the theory to practical implementation in tournament and games on IHF level, or maybe in their own leagues. Do you have anything that you were thinking about when you were reading this for the first time, and then you were going to sit with your colleague and go out on the ice? Do you have any insight tips or things you were thinking about to take it from theory to practical?
I think the most important is the communication between the referees before you go out on the ice. I know when you're just reading the manual, it can be pretty much text. You know, sometimes it's hard to understand, but when you go on the ice and think about what you've been reading, it makes sense. But I think the most important thing is before you go out on the ice with a colleague, sit down for half an hour before the game and really discuss the areas of responsibility so that everybody is on the same page. Then when you're on the ice, it's going to make sense when you start to adapt to that.
Did you feel that, you said it before the game, but when you go out on the ice and something happens, was it easier to discuss situation or things you do between you two colleagues when you had a common language and when you talked about these areas? Did it help you felt in that way?
Yeah, I think that's the best thing of having specific areas, because if you miss a situation, you can discuss. Why didn't I see that? Because that was in my area. And then you can talk, okay, maybe I had the wrong angle. Then we have to start to working with the positioning a little bit, maybe skate more to get creative, better angles to the situation. But now it's more clarified which area, which referee is responsible over. Then it's easier to discuss some things why you missed it.
And if I'm a new referee, I'm pretty starting up in the 4 official system and reading this document. Do you have any good advice to pass along for referees that are not so experienced and now are trying to learn the theory about the 4 official system through this document?
As I said before, we haven't reinvented the wheel. It's the same game of hockey we're going to officiate. There's only small changes to clarify some areas of responsibility. So I think just study the text, and as soon as you get out on the ice, it's going to make pretty much sense. I think when you have worked a couple of games after this manual, it's going to feel that it's a better thing to have. So I think just study the text, so you don't have to think too much when you're on the ice. Just read it, and I think it's gonna work out pretty good.
And lastly, for the game officials that are very experienced, like yourself, and you have done something for a very long time, and now it comes a little bit of an update in the procedures, what would you like to send along to the the more experienced game officials that are now going to implement this in maybe their elite leagues on top IHF events and levels?
Yeah, we experienced that in the Swedish league. We worked with this manual for 3 years, and when you've done a certain way for many years, it can be hard to change, because you think that the way you have worked was a good way, and now you're gonna adapt a little bit. So I think everybody should give it a chance, because now when we have worked for 3 years in the Swedish league and everybody's going on the same way, we really have developed the whole league when everybody's thinking on the same way. So I think everybody should give it a chance, experienced or not so very experienced, because when everybody's working the same way, it's gonna help the way to officiate.
We're really thankful for the sharing that Linus just did, and I hope that could conclude a little bit the referee part that we have on this introduction video. Let's move along here and look into a little bit more in depth of the linesperson procedures that we updated in this 4-official system. What we would like to start with is really one of the key aspects as a team that we talked about. You know, the areas of responsibility that we went through here briefly is not only in connection to the referees, it also has a big impact on our linesperson role. When it comes to the areas of responsibility in the attacking zone, we really talked about where the R1 and R2 have their main responsibility. It is important here to note, when we will talk a little bit more about the designated blue line, that L1 is really in control of following the puck and making sure that he or she has the best coverage of the blue line. L1 is also in this way the person in charge of when we do the switches and when we do the changes. As L1 is following the puck and making sure that he or she creates the best angles to make a decision whether the puck went offside or not, L2 has to make sure that he or she works in a way where they are able to support R1 and R2 in the various areas of responsibility. L2 has to use their best feel for the game to have an understanding of where the sightlines need to be at any given moment, and at the same time not lose the connection with the L1 partner on the blue line with any changes that might be needed if play is pushing L1 or putting L1 out of position and not having the best sightlines to make the call. As we also covered in the referee section, when we talk about the zone 1, the area that is really a shared area between the R1 and R2, but also between L2 and L1. This is where we need to create a good angle without losing our main duties of the offside and the icing decisions. We really would like to push here that L1 must have a good overview of the blue line, making the offside call, but also help to support around the area of R1. This doesn't mean that L2 should lose all of the sight lines on the play and focus on player outside the play. There could be quick passes, there could be quick changes where L2 could have the best angle to cover a check or any sort of situation from the angles and the sight lines that he or she have from their position as L2. This has to be a flexible work where you as a linesperson must use your best knowledge to have an understanding of where you are needed at that moment and at that situation. This cooperation comes with a lot of experience, but also with a lot of communications before the game, during the game, and after the game. What is really the key, what we would like to pass along about the areas of responsibility, is that the L1 and L2 does not get lost in the designated blue line work and forget about the coverage in the neutral zone. When we have big situations, when we have big checks, we need all four sightlines into the situation. This is utmost important to have a great teamwork when we work out there on the ice. So one of the biggest changes that we have that is mentioned a few times in our document, but hopefully now you will see a little bit more on the practical implementation of what we call the designated blue line. So what is then the designated blue line? Well, it is maybe a bigger switch for anyone that is a non-North American game officials that worked as a linesperson, because the designated blue line is really a way of working on sharing responsibility on making the offside calls. This means that a linesperson has a main responsibility of a specific blue line throughout the game. This switches after the half of the game. So if you use this example that you see right here, when the play goes down in the end zone, L1 is working the blue line where he or she has designated for that time period in the game, which means that the L1 will be mainly L1 in that end zone for the half of the game. This doesn't mean that L1 should take all the shitty positions, making all the calls without any support from L2. This is a cooperation on the blue line still, but L1 is mainly in charge of making the calls on the blue line. The question then is, why do we do this? Why do we keep this on the half of the game and then switch? Well, it's mainly for consistency and standard. On our top events where we use the 4 official system, in the majority, we also use the coach's challenge. In the coach's challenge, we have the options where a coach can challenge the situations for offside. When we have this with the designated blue line, it means that the L1, in this case, for half of the game, has a more consistent view of entrance in that zone. And if we would have a challenge where the linesperson have to challenge the on-ice call and see 100% that he or she was wrong, they have a greater understanding of how they have been playing and how the game has gone in for the half of the game before they switch to the other half. This is something where we believe that we could be of a higher consistency in the offside calls, and it's much more clear about the standard. But we really want to stress that, and you will see this in the instructional video that follows, that the designated blue line is not about clinching on to a blue line, never letting it go. It's still a flexible work where the main purpose of the positioning and the sightlines is to find the best sightline to make the right call. Sometimes that means that L1, even though it's his or her designated blue line, could be bumped, pressured, where L2 has to have a support and help for the linesperson to make the right call. When we talk about designated in the OPM, we also talk about the designated face-off spot. This means, just as with the blue line, that the game official, the linesperson, will have designated face-off spot where he or she will take the face-off, drop the puck for the half of the game before they switch over to the second half. In this example, you will see that L1 that had their designated blue line in the same area of the half of the ice, they will also be in charge of dropping the puck on the 4 designated face-off spots. This means that for the first half of the game, L1 will make all the face-offs in these 4 spots. This means that if L1 picks up the puck by himself or herself, they will go to the face-off spot and conduct the face-off. If L2 picks up the puck, for example, if we had an icing, L1 will then work with the face-off spot with the players taking place in that, and they will then hand off the puck and take the puck from L2 that will go out and cover the blue line. So with this handoff procedure, this means that L1 has more time to work with the players around the face-off, where L1 can be in charge to monitor the face-off really from the stoppage of play and until the puck goes into the ice. With these new procedures, it doesn't mean that we are strict and creating, things that are making our game harder. This also comes with common sense and keeping up speed in the game. There is no problem if we, for a couple of face-off, forget this, or we are having L2 dropping where L1 should have that. The important thing is that we come back as soon as possible to the procedure that we agreed on and that we follow the outlined procedures in the OPM. Use common sense, and we will be very successful in this switch. And why do we do this? What is the main reason? Well, it comes back to also why we want to work with the designated blue line. We want to have a better consistency and a better standard. And we believe that with this consistency of having designated blue face-off spots for half of the game, we will get to know the center better, and we will be able to work in a better way around the face-off on these 4 spots that we have designated for half of the game before we switches. This is also something in the switch where we will need to talk about it, who's the strong ones on the defensive, offensively face off, as they might be a difference on what we had on the first half of the game. We now would like to move on to a few video examples that we hope bring a little bit of a clarity, especially when it comes to the designated blue line and the designated face-off spot for you as a game official.
In the new 4 officials OPM, you will see that there are a few changes made for the linesperson's procedure. Please note that these changes is only to be implemented in the 4 official system and not in the 3 official system, if not noted in other way. We will first start off with a major change regarding the linesperson having designated blue lines. Designated blue lines means that the linesperson throughout the half of the game will work on a designated blue line. This will then be changed for the second half of the game to the opposite blue line than used at the first half. The basic cooperation and procedures for the linespersons has not been changed. This means that linespersons should work actively together and try to maintain a diagonal position to each other to make sure that they have the best basic positions to make the decisions. As shown in the video, this L1 having the main responsibility of the blue line will have the main responsibility of this blue line for the half of the game. Either the L1 has the responsibility of this for the first half of the game, or L2 will have this responsibility over this blue line for the first half of the game. This will then be changed throughout the game as we reach half part of the game. This means that this linesperson is in charge from making the majority of the decisions on this blue line, regardless on which side the linesperson is currently working on. The linesperson could be on the speaker box side or could be on the player bench side, but still have the major responsibility for that blue line. This change in procedures is mainly to create a better opportunity for the linespersons to know who's responsible and in charge for what blue line. This doesn't mean that the linespersons will maintain this blue line regardless what happens, but it makes us having a better start to know and understand on what blue line you're in charge on. As you will see, this is a mean of tool that the linesperson can use to make sure that they have a more consistent judgment and a higher standard on their designated blue line. It is important to note that in the majority of the tournaments that the IHF uses regarding the blue line procedures, we will have the coach's challenge for offside. This is also a mean to be more consistent when it comes to making calls within the judgment of coach's challenge and video review. As you will see here in this clip, the blue line is designated for the person dropping the puck in the end zone. But this doesn't mean that the linesperson up by the blue line that is not dropping the puck will evacuate from the blue line right away. It is important that the linesperson that is not conducting the face-off takes a big responsibility on the blue line and makes sure that he or she covers the blue line prior to the linesperson in charge of the blue line comes in place and takes over the judgment at the blue line. In this sequence, you will see that the L1 that is in charge of the blue line outside the white team's bench moves up in between the benches to be able to have a good player control when there's a scrum happening. This means that then the L2, the backlines person, needs to take over the responsibility for a shorter period of time while this linesperson is breaking up the scrum. After this is done, when all the players is in control, the linesperson will go back to be in charge of the blue line that he left. The next major change that you will notice is that we now also talk about designated face-off spots for the linespersons. This is one step to be more consistent and have a more equal standard on all the face-offs throughout the game. This means that the linespersons will, just like with the blue line, be in charge of designated face-off spots throughout the game. Just as with the designated blue line, the linespersons will be in charge of designated face-off spots for the half period of the game and then change for the second period of the game. The designated face-off spots is in the same defensive side as they have the designated blue line. This means that if a linesperson is having the designated blue line on the same side as the arrows in this picture, the linesperson will make all the face-off on the 4 face-off dots in this designated half. Once half of the game have passed by, the linesperson will then change side and take part of the opposite side, where the linesperson will also take care of the designated blue line and make all the face-offs on the designated face-off spots. This is the basic procedure to be able to have a smooth operation where the linespersons can cooperate and work together to maintain a good standard on the face-off throughout the game. This procedure is also an important factor to keep up the pace in the game, to make sure that we have smooth stoppages of play. You will see this take place as we also then work with a procedure that is called the handoff. In this new procedure with the handoff, the linesperson at the designated face-off spots will make sure that he or she selects, or through the teams, select the face-off spot to be used for the next face-off. The linesperson will then indicate that position, and if needed, the other linesperson will pick up the puck and hand it over to the linesperson. As seen in this case, the puck is conveniently closely located to the linesperson so that the linesperson himself can pick up the puck. When we have, for example, icing situations, this is where we get a little bit more smooth in our operations. The linesperson that is in the back will have a good communication and overview of the players, just like in previous OPMs. The back linesperson will then have a good communication with the attacking team that have an opportunity to select which side the face-off will take place on. The linesperson will indicate that by pointing towards that face-off spot and take a proper position and wait for the puck to be received. As you will see in this video, the back linesperson is actively working with the non-offending team to select the right face-off spot, while the front linesperson is using active skating to pick up the puck and hand it over to the linesperson in charge of the face-off. Active skating and hustle is an important factor for the front linesperson picking up the puck and handing it over to the linesperson conducting the face-off. This is where we create pace and speed in our game. It is also important that when the linesperson hand off the puck, that he or she also uses active skating to take a position on the blue line so that the face-off can be conducted in a good pace. A good communication with the teams, where we actively work with our body language, especially as the backlines person, will create a good and smooth procedure regarding the face-offs. It will also help that the colleague knows where to hand off the puck, and he or she can actively work with getting to the right position in time to have a smooth face-off procedure. Face-offs and designated blue line is a teamwork. Remember that this is a basic rule. If we are not able to do this once or twice, that's okay, but we should not bring bad habits into the game and work according to procedures.
We hope that the video examples gave a little bit more clarity in the work, especially around the designated blue line and the face-off spots. To give us a little bit more insights and some knowledge in this transition for some of you, we have invited one of the more experienced linesperson within the IHF. We hope that Ludwig Lundgren, currently one of the professional linesperson working with the SHL and also with education within the Swedish Ice Hockey Federation, can share a little bit of his experience, both from his active part on the ice from World Championship, World Under-20 Championship, and the Olympic Winter Games. But also to give a little bit of a structural advice, how you as linesperson can implement this from the theoretical aspect to the games that we will work now here shortly after viewing this video and reading the material. Ludwig, we talked here and heard a little bit from Linus about the work with areas of responsibility in the relationship to a referee. But obviously, as we said in this presentation, this also relies to the linesperson. From your perspective as a linesperson, what was the biggest change when we start to talk about areas of risk in player control and your work together with the referees during the game?
Well, it kind of makes my role or my supporting role more precise and in some ways also explains its purpose. It brings structure to things that previously were more maybe outlined and improvised. On the other hand, systems are not 100% certain, and some room for improvisation still exists and need to exist. With that said, I kind of feel like it's safe to have a basic pattern to fall back on.
Do you feel that you have to change anything practically in your work together with colleagues when you had a more outlined areas of focus for the referees, but also where the linesperson need to cover up maybe and help the referees in a bit more strict guidelines in that way?
Yes and no. Maybe more that it kind of showed that we previously worked differently without even reflecting on it. And by facing this and discussing it, we actually brought certain things to the surface, and that helps us in our development, I would say.
And really one of the bigger changes, it's not really mentioned that big, I would say, in our theoretical documents, but in the practical implementation is a fairly large change, is that we now within the IHF, we talk about designated blue line, that the linesperson works now in a designated blue line. Quite a big change for especially, I would say, European or to put it in non-North American style of working. How did you feel now when you have worked one season in the SHL with this kind of setup with the designated blue line?
Yeah, honestly, I was kind of skeptical at first. It felt like the system was less flexible and that the same level of competence and cooperation was not needed. But it actually has had the opposite effect. It's easier for me now to help my colleagues, and it's easier for my colleagues to help me, which makes us better together.
Linus talked a little bit about, for the implementation, one of the keys were talking with your colleagues prior to the game to build up that game plan, especially with the new parts. Did you add anything in your game preparation when it came to this designated blue line with your colleague?
I think the most important thing is to make sure that you're clear in your signals, to show that you are actually in control of the line or not. It's as important to not make a signal if you're not certain about a call as to make a signal if you're certain about a call. Yeah, that's a big difference.
And like you said, with the flexibility there, do you still feel that it's a locked in position? You can never abandon your post in that way with the blue line, or how do you practically solve some problems or things that can happen in a hockey game?
It's all about, having the right angle, making the right call. All right. So if I see my colleague has a better angle to make the call, I will let him make the call. And that takes kind of guts to back away from situations that you are responsible for, but not making that call and letting your colleague do that makes us better.
When we talk about designated blue lines, we also come into the change with the designated face-off spots. It follows kind of the same pattern with consistency in a certain area where we switch after half the game. What was your general feeling about the face-off spots there? Was it the same as with the blue line?
Yes, I would say that the division of responsibilities becomes clearer. It's easier to see and perceive patterns, but also to correct what you actually identify, which hopefully makes the emissions faster and the face-offs fairer, I would say.
Did you have any learnings, like anything you would like to share here for the viewers that you learned in the transition from being a little bit more flexible, so to say, on the selection of face-off spots and who's taking it where to now having it designated? Was there anything you wish you would have done differently, or things that you felt like this is something I would like to share with my colleagues?
I would say to take it easy in the beginning. If you're, you have to keep your eye on the duty, what we as a team are supposed to do together. Don't do anything you're not happy with, or if you end up on the wrong blue line, it's not the end of the world. Take it easy, take your time to get back to where you're supposed to be, and take it from there.
How important did you feel that it was to actually have a good communication with your partner on the ice, with this new stuff, to utilize power breaks or other natural stoppage in the game to have a discussion or to lift problems or things happening with the new designated blue line and face-off spots throughout the game?
Well, it's absolutely key to have an open mind to this and to discuss issues that occur. That's the way we move forward. And also to avoid making the same mistakes as your colleague, or my colleague avoiding making the same mistakes that I do, is to communicate.
We had now a chance to get some insights from Ludwig, but also from Linus here previously with the referees. And this is really two roles that now will come together when we combine a little bit about updates that is really all about teamwork. We have a few procedures in the new OPM that is something where all 4 game officials on the ice have to adjust and work a little bit differently for the coming season. One of those procedures is the penalty shot procedure. This has been a procedure that had looked very differently from various IHF events, but also how it's been worked around the world in the 4 official system. For clarity, that's why we implemented this new procedure in the OPM. What is really important here in the theoretical aspect is that the person that makes the call becomes R2, that takes a position low by the net. R2 will have a main focus on the goalkeeper and making the decision around the goal. R1 will be the one a little bit higher up, getting another sight line than R2 has, and will mainly focus on the player taking the penalty shot and follow the player to see if he or she is making any illegal move according to the rule of conducting a penalty shot. This is a cooperation, but it's also important that we have this just with any other part, areas of responsibility that both R1 and R2 are very well aware about. When it comes to the lines person, you see that the basic position is pretty much the same as previously. But the key aspect here is really that L2 is in charge from a position out a little bit from the scorekeeper's bench to make sure that he or she has a good overview of the player's bench and the players on the player's bench. They need to monitor if there's any player making any illegal action or any coach or any staff that has an effect on the penalty shot taker. L1 is the one putting off the puck at the center ice. After that is done and the referees give a clear signal to start the penalty shot, L1 will back off a little bit and then take a position a few meters behind the players for a safe distance to make sure that they follow he or she in the movement forward towards the net. This is to create another pair of sight lines to make sure that the center conducts the penalty shot in a proper way. So when we have a pre-start, this is a basic starting position. And when we actually conduct the face-off, not the face-off, the penalty shot, this is the way that we then will work. Everything is created to create the best sightlines. We will now have a little bit of a look how this can look in the implementation from one of the games that we had at the World Championship in Finland.
In the new and updated 4 Officials Manual, there is a new procedure regarding penalty shots. When the referee calls for a penalty shot, it is important that he or she gives a clear signal on what is about to happen. Whenever a penalty shot is called, it is important that the one that calls the penalty shots take the lead in the procedures. The one calling the penalty shot will go up to the penalty box, report the action, and make sure that the team is ready to get started with the penalty shot procedure. The one calling the penalty shot will also automatically be R1 and the lower referee. Both referees take a position down low, while the linesperson take control over the players' benches and the puck. Starting with the referee's procedure, we would really like to emphasize that this is a shared responsibility where both referees stand low on the penalty shot. It is important that R1 is the one starting up the penalty shots and make sure to give a signal for when the player can start to shoot. To be able to make the best possible call, the low referee R1, the one that have signaled the penalty shot, will be the one that is mainly in charge for monitoring the goalkeeper. It's important that R1 makes sure that the goalkeeper is not starting to move earlier than allowed or is not starting outside the goal crease. As you can see, R2, the high referee that did not make the call, takes a little bit of a higher position and have a main responsibility to oversee the player that takes the shot. Both referees have a shared responsibility to make sure that the right call is made, but R1 is mainly in charge of the entire procedure. R1 is also the one making the signal whether this should be a goal or a no-goal. R2 can help and emphasize the call by also showing goal or a no-goal signal. It is important that the referees are not making different types of signal in this situation. Here we see the perspective from R2. R2 has a good eye on the penalty shot shooter from when he starts until he shoots. Of course, you use a broad perspective to catch as much as possible. R1 takes a lower position as seen here. Make sure that he has a good sightline, that the goalkeeper is not moving prematurely in the penalty shot. R1 also is the one making the signal and reporting the goal. When it comes to the linesperson, it is important that they are very active in connection to that the referee has called a penalty shot. The linesperson divides on 2 sides of the ice, where we will have the L1 taking the position at center ice. L1 makes sure that the goalkeepers and the referees are ready down low. L1 will then move back from the center ice dot and the puck to allow the penalty shot taker to take the shot. L2 will then take a position by the player's bench. This is not to have an overview of the penalty shot, but this is a starting point where L2 then will trail behind the player taking the penalty shot, making sure that he has a good angle to see the penalty shot being taken.
In the best of the worlds, we will always have 4 officials out on the ice. But for some part of the game, or for an entire game, we could have injured game officials. This is, of course, something we would never hope happens, but it's a situation that we have seen happen many times and where we need to have a system on how we work as a team out on the ice when we're not able to work in a 4 official system way. We work then in two different ways. We will work if we have an injured linesperson in what we call in this chapter 5, the 2 referee and 1 linesperson system. This means that if we have an injured linesperson, we will only continue with 1 linesperson, and we will still have 2 referees. To clarify a little bit the working pattern and the procedures in this very specific system, we have added this in chapter 5. We hope that you read that thoroughly and that you have a good knowledge on how we adjust the work in the 4 official system when we have to go from 4 to 3 with 2 remaining referees and 1 remaining linesperson. If we, for an unfortunate reason, would have 1 referee and 2 linespersons due to an injured referee, then we would go back to work according to the IHF 3 official system officiating procedure manual. Make sure that even if you work in the majority of your games in a 4 official system, that you have a good basic knowledge of the IHF 3 official system. In that rare case that you would have an injured referee and you as a referee or linesperson are forced to continue in the game and finish the game in a 3 official system. This is really the key aspect, that we don't get too focused on only reading the 4 officials manual so that we are prepared if the worst case scenario happen. We really would like to thank you for bearing with us in this video. And we hope that this introduction video, together with Linus and with Ludwig, have given you a little bit more insight when you take this theory and want to implement it in the practical aspect in your league games or in the IHF games. We have a few important send-alongs that we would like you to finish off with. The first one is that you never forget that this is a manual and not a rule book. Even as Linus and Ludwig says, it is important that we have the same common ground to be as good as possible. We also have to accept that we work with ice hockey. Ice hockey is a fast-paced game with a lot of things happening that is hard to predict. This manual is there to give you the best support and help, but not to lock you in, maybe in a way as the rule book. Try to work in a common ground, but also try to work with a flexible mind so that you can make the best possible call out on the ice. Our second send-along is really the pre-game preparation. There is nothing more important than that we have a good pre-game preparation. We can have discussions. We should have information flow going out on the ice, but we can prevent a lot of discussions about so-called fuck-ups, so-called errors, so-called mistakes if we have a good pre-game preparation. This is where we prepare each other for the best performance possible and where we minimize mistakes, or where we get prepared on how we handle things that seem maybe a bit unforeseen out on the ice. And our last send-along that we really want to have with us in this case is that we never chase the play. The play is something we are there to monitor and follow, and we should never be too puck focused or to be too chasing the play. Be relaxed, let the play come to you, take the positions to get the play in the best sight line, and never be stressed and chase the play. Because when we do that, and when we work with a good teamwork, then we will be extremely successful on ice game officials, regardless what level you will take this material to. If you work on a lower level and this is something that really excel you in your officiating, or you prepare now for an upcoming World Championship final, we hope that this material, together with your cooperation with your colleagues, with the officiating staff, and with the officiating coaches, will be an official that it comes to a high success as often as possible and as in many games as possible. From the IHF side, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for taking part and being an ambassador of this new 4 officials manual, and best of luck in the coming games.